Hey lady friends, welcome to Become a Podcast Queen. Are you a coach, a consultant, a network marketer, a thought leader, an entrepreneur, a keynote or public speaker, or a creative type? Perhaps you're a hobby podcaster or have a podcast of your own for your business. If so, then you're in the right place. This is a podcast for the heart-centered and bold, badass woman who wants to find, use, and amplify her own unique voice to become an absolute powerhouse in her own podcast. If you're ready to pour your passion and purpose into your very own podcast and have a positive impact and influence in the world while making an income at the same time, then please join me in these empowering conversations. Learn all of my secrets around getting your podcast up and off the ground, speaking your dreams into existence, marketing and promoting your podcast, elevating your brand awareness, growing your downloads and listenership while attracting paying clients and paying customers through the power of podcasting. My name is Olivia Powell, your hostess with the mostest. I'm an international podcast and business coach and a mentor to female entrepreneurs. Tune in each episode for tons of helpful insights, actionable steps to implement straight into your own podcast so that you can put your best work out there into the world. I am here to help you harness the power of podcasting to guide and inspire you to elegantly strap on those lady balls, grab the mic and press record. Are you ready to birth and build your podcast while becoming a queen at podcasting at the same time? We don't wait until we're ready. We unapologetically crown and anoint ourselves to deliver our message. Are you with me? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to today's episode, all about why you should start your very own podcast if you haven't already started one. And if you already do have one, then this is good to know about because it's going to reconfirm your awesome decision that you've made. So why you should start a podcast for your business or as a hobby or as a passion project, whatever the reason is, there are so many benefits to having a podcast, especially if you're a coach, a consultant, a network marketer, you sell a physical product, you're a public or motivational speaker, or just a creative person that likes to talk. There are so many awesome reasons why, and we're going to go through a couple of those in today's episode. And I'm actually going to throw to you a few cold, hard facts and stats, some statistics supporting my claim of why podcasting is so beneficial. And there's a lot of interesting data to support this too, actually. And it's just so tremendous to actually do the research on this sort of thing, guys. I'm very right-brained, so I'm more of a creative person. I'm not so technical and analytical and numbery and statistics and stuff, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on this, but I'm going to give you an idea. Now, these statistics, I'm reading these as of the 10th of June 2020. All these statistics are from 2020. They're not from a couple of years ago for the most part. I'm going to pull a couple from a few years ago so you can see the growth in this industry. But by the time you hear this, statistics might have changed. And also, we are still in the middle of the pandemic of COVID-19. So I'm sure that once, in a few months' time, if not next year, these statistics are going to be different again for sure. So I'm going to give you some global statistics, but it's also going to be focused on America and Australia because that's where most of the research is from, actually. So how many podcasts are there currently? According to Edison's research, which is, the Bible, the holy grail of statistics and podcasting and all this jazz, is from 2020, and there are currently over 900,000 podcast shows all around the globe. 900,000. And on top of that, I actually know personally people, close to me, people that aren't so close to me, that have started their own podcast during this pandemic as well, which is super cool. As of January in 2020, so this year, there are over 30 million episodes. 30 million podcast episodes worldwide, and that's of January. We are now in July, it's the 10th of July, so imagine how many more episodes there are. And this is including content in more than 100 languages. How crazy is that? 51% of the US population has listened to a podcast before, so more than half the population, 51%. I'm repeating these numbers because I just want you to get the gravity of this situation. It's so huge. So there's 331 million people living in the US. Half of this is 165 million people. So 165 million Americans have listened to podcasts before. That's massive. Think about that for a second. 165 million people are consuming content in a way that you're not taking advantage of right now if you don't have a podcast. And that's just the Americans, 165 million people, right, in America. or like the other 50% basically. Think about all the other people worldwide, all the other populations worldwide that aren't listening to podcasts yet. And I use yet because it is a growing industry and it's only going to keep booming. Imagine what difference that would make in your business if you had that much reach right now. So in terms of global statistics at the moment, South Korea leads the way, basically, with 58% of the population that's listened to a podcast in the past month, followed by Spain at 40%, followed by Sweden at 36%. And then the funny thing is that Australia and the US are on the same playing field at 33%. From there, Italy is at 30%, Canada and France are tied at 28%, followed by Japan at 26%, Germany at 22%, and the UK at 18%. So that's quite a lot. That's pretty amazing. So if your target market or your target audience or your ideal listener is sitting in one of those countries, then you should totally be taking advantage of this right now. Bringing it back to the US for a second, 50% of all US homes are podcast fans. That is, once again, tremendous. That is amazing. Like, it blows my mind. Most listeners tend to be between the ages of 24 and 35%. And I'm willing to bet that your ideal customer or client is somewhere in that age range, right? Especially if you own or run an online business. 49% of podcast listening is done at home. Now, I'm betting that that's actually probably a little bit higher now that coronavirus is here and people are having to work their jobs from home and all this sort of stuff. So that number's probably greater than that. So they're probably listening while they're, cooking meals or meal prepping, doing the dishes, walking the dog, doing the laundry, other types of housework, painting their nails, exercising, whatever it is that they do. 22% of podcast listening is done in the car. So I must be the minority because I listen to podcasts. Every time I'm in the car, I open the car door, that podcast is on. Sometimes when I'm walking to my car, I've already got a podcast episode playing. Yeah, like as I've said, I'm obsessed. Smartphones also tend to be the most common means of listening to a podcast, followed by a computer, then a tablet and other devices. So think about how many people have smartphones these days. Like everyone, right? Everyone has a smartphone these days. Podcast listeners are more active on social media channels. So think about that for a second. 94% are active on at least one social media app, as opposed to the rest of the population, which is 81% of people are on more than one social media app. Yeah, so that means that with your podcast, if you do decide to start one or if you've already got one, is to start marketing it on social media. It is a game changer. That's how I grew my podcast over the last 20 plus months to the number that it is today, which is over 12,000. 69 million Americans listen to a podcast on a monthly basis. Every month they listen to podcasts, which is a 14% increase since 2016. 42 million listen on a weekly basis. So every week, 42 million are listening to a podcast. That's 15% of the entire population of the US that you're not reaching if you don't have a podcast. Not only are you missing out on reaching all of these potential customers, clients, listeners, prospects, all that sort of stuff, this data really strongly suggests that podcasting is on the up. Podcasting is growing, and I bet once the coronavirus has passed, whenever that will be, podcasting is going to go bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. This shit is bananas. Right? You mark my words. Come back to me when corona's over. Watch your download rate absolutely spike and be like, Olivia was right about that. I'm going to have to get back to her and let her know. So there has been a steady growth already, 10 to 20%. There's been increases over the last few years in podcasting. 50% of weekly listeners listen to 3 hours of podcasting every single week. 3 hours. I reckon I'm probably a little bit higher than that number, but we'll just keep that between you and I, okay? So keep that to yourself. But that's half of weekly listeners. That's massive. Now, in terms of companies, there are more and more companies spending money on ads in the podcasting world. Yeah. So in 2015, business ad spend was, wait for it, I need a drum roll. I'm just using a pen. $69 million. 69 million. In 2017, right, it's way higher. Just 2 years later, it's $220 million. Is your brain, my brain's exploding. Is your brain exploding and like splattering all over the wall right now? Because, when I read these stats, like my mouth just dropped. So what is it that these companies and corporations and businesses know that, you don't, or we don't, or I don't? And that's that podcast listeners are loyal and they take action. They're more likely to purchase stuff, yeah? And this is the exact type of person that you want consuming your podcast episodes, right? You don't want people that are just going to listen and not do anything. You don't want people that are just going to be on an email list and delete your emails. You don't want people that are just going to pop on a Facebook Live and then, chuff off before it ends, right? You don't want the no-shows. You want people that are dedicated, that are going to rock up, they're going to show up, they're going to consume your stuff, and they're going to take action on that stuff that you're putting out there. You want people to crave your content and consume it in a way that they keep coming back. They hang on your every word. They're eager to hear more about what you have to say and what you have to offer and what you can deliver to them. Podcast listeners are more likely to follow companies and brands on social media, and this is what companies know. They know this. They know that podcast listeners are loyal and that they take action, and this is exactly who you're wanting to target. 69% agreed that podcast ads, this is podcast listeners, made them more aware of new products and services. 69%, that's nearly 70%. Podcast listeners are more likely to be active on every social media channel. Every social media channel. That's crazy. Like, that's nuts. 48% of the monthly podcast consumers follow brands and companies on social media. They follow the people that they support from these podcasts on their other platforms because the podcast host or hostess has built that connection. They've built that bond. They've built that trust with that listener, and the listener's fallen in love with the host and they want to connect with them further, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is that that podcast host is on. 80% of podcast listeners listen to all or most of every single podcast episode that you release. That's pretty big. That's a massive retention rate. That means that the podcast host that is putting their stuff out there and then the listener is retaining, their attention is retained for that amount of time, however long your episode is. Of course, it depends on your specific podcast length. But that's monumental. It's not like a Facebook video where people pop on for the first 5 seconds or 2 minutes and then they go away. 80% of listeners are listening to the whole thing, if not most of it. This also means that when podcast listeners are consuming your content, they're focused as fuck. Excuse my language. Excuse my French. We know that I swear on here. They might be multitasking. They might be doing some other things, putting makeup on, getting ready for work or whatever it is, but they're committed to listening to that whole thing that you've put out. They're committed to listening to what you've got to say. Which is huge, which is massive. I hope you guys understand the gravity of this because it is a big, big thing. Excuse me while I interrupt this conversation for a minute. Did you know that when you want to create your own podcast, it needs a virtual home online before your podcast is available to other platforms like Spotify, YouTube, Google Play Music, and other online destinations? Well, if not, that's okay, girlfriend. You're not the only one. So many women who want to start a podcast just don't know where the heck to have their podcast hosted. When I was researching this, I reached out to a whole bunch of other podcast hosts that I listened to and loved and admired and asked what their thoughts were, and every single one came back to me and recommended Libsyn. Libsyn spelt Libsyn. Word of mouth is so incredibly powerful. So what do I use now? I use Libsyn and I've never looked back. It was a no-brainer and easy decision to choose Libsyn as the podcasting hosting platform for my own podcast. So I've decided to partner with this professional and amazing company, and I'm gifting this to you to take the overwhelm away for you. So if you sign up with Libsyn, you can get 1 to 2 months absolutely free by using the special code word Olivia to gain this discount. But make sure you sign up with the $20 monthly account so that you get access to the analytics feature, which means you get to see your podcast grow in front of your very own eyeballs. You will have access to see how many downloads per day, per week, per month, and per year. The other thing is, be sure to sign up after the 3rd of the month so you definitely get that month for free. This is why I started my own podcast on the 3rd of December. So as a recap, Libsyn is spelled Libsyn. Link is in the show notes and you are welcome. The average podcast listener subscribes to 6 podcasts, and they tend to listen to 7 episodes per week on average. 6 podcasts. You want to be one of those podcasts that they follow and subscribe to. This, to me, means that when they find a podcast that they like, they stick with them. Yeah? They're loyal to those people. If the podcast host is regularly and consistently producing and showing up and sharing their content on their podcast show, then the listener returns episode after episode, week after week, month after month, and yes, year after year. The podcast hosts that I personally listen to, which is about between 4 and 6, funnily enough, actually, I keep listening to their stuff and I've re-listened to their stuff. That's pretty crazy when you think about that. So yes, podcast listeners are loyal and they're also educated. They're affluent. People that don't care about their lives or bettering themselves or improving themselves, they don't tend to listen to podcasts unless they're just funny, for example. But yes, I'm talking to you, the person that's listening to this podcast right now as I speak. You have these traits. You're loyal, you're affluent, and you're educated. These people are committed to improving and bettering themselves like me. I always, like I say to my clients and people that know me, I'm always trying to better myself in some way. I'm always, thriving. I'm always learning. I'm always applying things to my life to improve it and make it better and make me better. And podcast listeners are no different. These are the sort of people that you want to be reaching, yeah? These people are also hungry for connection and you can provide that connection with them. The ability to listen to high quality content no matter where you are or what you're doing is a big reason for the growth of the podcasting industry over the past 15 years. And yes, podcasting has been around for that long. 11% of podcast listeners turn on programs while they're working, which can be great for entrepreneurs taking care of their routine business tasks. So when I think about when I listen to podcasts, it's usually when I'm putting makeup on, getting ready to go out somewhere, in the car, that sort of thing, doing housework at home, that sort of stuff. Podcast listeners are also more likely to subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime. Now, this was interesting to me. You know what this tells me? It tells me 2 things. It means that they're less likely to be exposed to advertising on TV, so they're not going to sit there through ads, over and over and over again. But also they like binging shit. They like listening to stuff. They like consuming stuff. So I know I binge stuff on Netflix. I binge stuff on podcasting. So, podcast listeners generally are the same. Now, I want to talk beyond the statistics. So that was enough, numbers for my brain. I want to talk a bit more than that, a bit more fundamental, foundational, a little bit more deep. So not only have we talked about how many people are listening to podcasts and all the facts and stats around that, but when it really comes down to it, podcasting builds trust. Podcasting builds trust. It also puts you in a leadership position because it means that you're creating something and you're putting it out there, which means you're a leader in that particular industry or niche, which also means that people start to see you as an authority in that area, an expert, so to speak. You can basically have expert status on a particular area or topic or subject or interest or hobby, which also gives you credibility. So that also generates more trust. The thing I love about podcasting is that it builds intimacy with your people. Intimacy, you can't just create out of thin air, right? It requires a few things to actually build that. And you can't always just build intimacy from writing on a screen or a still selfie or a still image on, a mobile screen or a laptop screen. Like the intimacy that you can have with a podcast is you are directly speaking into people's ears. Like directly, they can hear your tone, they can hear your inflection, they can hear your mannerisms, your sense of humor, your laugh, the way you phrase things. That's what really builds intimacy. The other thing is that podcasts are evergreen content, which means that your stuff is going to be around for a long, long time. It's not like a Snapchat where it's gone in seconds. It's not like an Instagram story where it's gone in 24 hours or Facebook stories. It's not just a once-off Facebook post that gets lost in the feed. Your stuff is there and it's searchable and it's shareable, which means you can actually be in more places than one place. So what I mean by that is instead you can record a podcast episode and you can repurpose it for other platforms. And this is what I do now. This is how I've restructured my business and my podcast. I create the podcast episode and then I create my content pieces from that episode and share it on social media. You can pull things out of your podcast episode and share them on whatever platform you're on, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. And guess what? The brilliant thing about podcasting is that you can have a video component to it as well. You can do video podcasting and share and upload to things like YouTube or, wherever you want, basically. There is just so much variety and evergreen content to work with here. With podcasting, you can reach an entire new audience because it's an entire different platform to all the other social media channels, right? 42 million people listen to podcasts on a weekly basis. Are you reaching that amount of people on Facebook? I doubt it. Probably not. If you're an influencer or a celebrity or you've been in business for years, then awesome, that's great. But most people aren't. And a podcast, and even if you are, a podcast can still help elevate that for you. The thing to remember here is that people that listen to podcasts, like yourself and I, we freaking love podcasts, right? We consume podcasts like crazy and we rave about them and we share them with people and our friends. We recommend them, we consume them, we search for them. You know, we're very loyal to this platform because we just love it. We've found podcast hosts that we enjoy. We like their stuff and we keep showing up for more. I just want to mention too, guys, is like, you know, I recently landed this incredible speaking opportunity, a public speaking gig that I would never have landed, I think, if I didn't have my podcast, had the opportunity to build this intimacy with this particular person. But, you know, this particular speaking event is happening in August this year, which is just next month, which is kind of scary to think about. But without my podcast, that would never have been a thing. That would never have been an opportunity, I don't think, you know, because the podcast did give me credibility. He probably sat there and went, well, she's used to talking. She could probably just do this on a stage. And so, you know, thankfully that happened. So that's pretty cool. Another benefit to podcasting, which I absolutely love and adore, is the fact that you don't have to have your hair and makeup done. You do not have to be camera ready, which is a huge benefit because I don't have a glam team that I can call, you know, that's on speed dial that I can call to my home and get me glammed up for like a photo shoot or, you know, videoing or anything like that. It just makes it super easy not having to be all glammed up all the time, you know, to record. Like I literally went to the gym before this, had a sweaty gym session, came home, I've had a shower, and now I'm in my loungewear because that's, you know, all the rage at the moment with coronavirus, and I literally do wear loungewear. So when you think about it, with all the people that are listening to podcasting, with all the opportunity that is out there, there's really no reason not to start your very own podcast. It's just a huge opportunity and it can open more doors for you and your business. Podcasting awareness and consumption is going to be on the rise, and it already is. Like the statistics reflect that, but there's so much more potential than there already is currently. You know, Joe Rogan, if you don't know who Joe Rogan is, go Google him now, but he sold his podcast show to Spotify. That's a huge move in the podcasting industry. That is mammoth. That's massive. So all of this is just evidence to get onto the podcast bandwagon so you don't miss out on the opportunities that are just waiting on the other side. Podcasts are the future. Podcasting, I personally think, is the new blogging. It's the future, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I do have a queen quote of the day for you, and that is, "A year from now, you will have wished that you started today." And that quote is by Karen Lamb. So happy podcasting, and I'll see you queens in the next episode. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and listening in. I truly, truly appreciate you and your listenership. I really do. And if you happen to love this episode, feel free to share it with someone to join my podcast quest of empowering more and more women to rise up, find and use their own voices to unlock a podcast of full self-expression, creativity, and freedom. I can't wait for you to show up, share your story, and serve others through your own podcast. And if you want help to achieve this and receive more personalized care, then feel free to email me at oliviapowcoaching@gmail.com to book a consult. Or you can join the conversation in my free Facebook group by searching Become a Podcast Queen Community. If you want to hang out on Instagram, search me at Olivia Power Coaching. See you in the next episode, Queens.